The Russia-Ukraine war has entered a critical phase with dramatic developments unfolding over the past 24 hours that could potentially reshape the entire trajectory of this nearly 4-year conflict. In the early hours of Saturday, December 27th, Russia launched a massive and devastating overnight attack on Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, using a lethal combination of cruise missiles and ballistic missiles that rained down on the city, causing widespread destruction and chaos. Fires erupted across multiple locations throughout Kyiv, with flames engulfing a car repair shop and spreading to several residential buildings, creating scenes of panic and devastation as emergency services rushed to contain the blazes and rescue trapped residents. In one particularly distressing incident, elderly residents of a care home had to be evacuated as flames threatened their facility, highlighting how these attacks continue to target civilian areas and put the most vulnerable populations at risk. City officials have confirmed that at least 8 people were injured in these latest strikes, though the full extent of casualties and damage is still being assessed as rescue and recovery operations continue throughout the day. This attack on Kyiv comes at an extraordinarily significant moment diplomatically, occurring just one day before what could be the most consequential meeting of the entire war. President Volodymyr Zelensky is scheduled to meet with United States President Donald Trump on December 28 at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida, a meeting that both sides are describing as potentially decisive for the future of Ukraine and the broader European security architecture. Speaking to reporters ahead of this crucial encounter, Zelensky revealed that a comprehensive 20-point peace plan that has been painstakingly negotiated and hammered out by Ukrainian and American officials over recent weeks is now 90% ready, suggesting that significant progress has been made behind the scenes in finding common ground between the various parties involved in this complex conflict. Zelensky stated that his primary focus during the Trump meeting will be discussing how Ukraine's international allies can provide robust and credible security guarantees for Ukraine's future, acknowledging that the nature and strength of these guarantees will be absolutely critical in determining whether any peace agreement can be sustainable and lasting. The emerging details of this peace plan reveal just how dramatically the diplomatic landscape has shifted and how much Ukraine has been forced to reconsider its previous red lines under the immense pressure of prolonged warfare and changing international dynamics. In what represents Ukraine's biggest and most significant territorial concession since the war began, Zelensky has indicated that Kyiv is now willing to turn the parts of the Donbas region that Ukrainian troops currently control into a demilitarized zone, but only if Russia also commits to keeping its soldiers out of this contested eastern region of Ukraine. This represents a fundamental shift in Ukraine's negotiating position. As previously, Kyiv had insisted on the complete restoration of its internationally recognized borders, including all of Donbas. The Ukrainian president has also spoken about creating a second demilitarized zone near the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which is Europe's largest nuclear facility and has been under Russian control since the early days of the invasion, raising grave concerns about nuclear safety throughout the conflict. However, the most contentious and potentially deal-breaking issue remains Ukraine's relationship with NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Russia has insisted from the very beginning of this war that it will absolutely not accept Ukraine becoming a member of NATO, claiming that NATO expansion eastward represents an existential threat to Russian security, an argument that Western officials have consistently rejected as propaganda designed to justify unprovoked aggression. The Trump administration has made it abundantly clear that Ukraine must give up its NATO aspirations if there is to be any realistic path toward peace, marking a significant departure from the unwavering support for Ukraine's Euro-Atlantic integration that characterized the previous Biden administration's policy. Despite this intense pressure from its most important ally, Ukraine continues to resist demands that it introduce constitutional amendments explicitly stating that it will remain neutral and permanently renounce any ambition to seek NATO membership, understanding that such a concession would represent a fundamental betrayal of the pro-Western popular revolution that brought the current government to power and would leave Ukraine vulnerable to future Russian aggression without the protection of collective defense arrangements. To address Ukraine's legitimate security concerns without formal NATO membership, the peace plan reportedly includes provisions for security guarantees that are designed to mirror Article 5 of the NATO treaty, which is the collective defense clause stating that an attack on one member is considered an attack on all members. According to details that have emerged about the plan, the United States, NATO, member states and European signatory countries will provide Ukraine with these robust security guarantees, and critically, if Russia were to invade Ukraine again in the future, there would be a coordinated military response from these guarantor nations, and all global sanctions against Russia would be immediately reinstated. However, many experts and analysts remain deeply skeptical about whether such security guarantees can truly be credible and enforceable without the formal treaty obligations and integrated military structures that come with actual NATO membership, noting that similar security assurances have failed in the past. While diplomatic efforts intensify and peace talks generate headlines, the brutal reality on the ground continues unabated, with military operations proceeding at full intensity on both sides. Russia's Ministry of Defense has claimed that its forces captured the Ukrainian village of Kosivtseve in the southeastern Zaporizhia region, adding to the steady if slow territorial gains that Russian forces have been making in recent months through grinding attritional warfare that has cost both sides enormous casualties. According to analysis of data from the Institute for the Study of War covering the period from November 25th to December 22nd, Russian forces gained 138 square miles of Ukrainian territory during that roughly month-long period, demonstrating that despite massive losses in personnel and equipment, Russia continues to make incremental progress in pushing Ukrainian forces back through sheer weight of numbers and firepower. The attacks have not been limited to Kyiv as Russia continues its systematic campaign of striking Ukrainian infrastructure across the entire country. Overnight on December 26, Russia launched drone attacks targeting Ukraine's seaport facilities and energy infrastructure in the Odessa and Mykolaiv regions along the Black Sea coast, as well as railway infrastructure in Volyn Oblast in northwestern Ukraine near the Polish border. These attacks on port facilities had international implications as Russian drones damaged commercial vessels sailing under the flags of Slovakia, Palau, and Liberia that were docked in ports in Ukraine's Odessa and Mykolaiv regions, raising questions about freedom of navigation and the safety of international shipping in Ukrainian waters. Russia's strategy of systematically targeting energy infrastructure, transportation networks, and port facilities is clearly designed to cripple Ukraine's economy, make life unbearable for civilians, and destroy the country's ability to export grain and other commodities that are crucial sources of revenue for the Ukrainian government and vital for global food security. Ukraine has not been passive in the face of these relentless attacks and continues to demonstrate its growing capability to strike deep inside Russian territory using increasingly sophisticated indigenous drone technology and Western-provided cruise missiles. Long-range Ukrainian drones successfully targeted oil storage facilities at Temryak port on the Russian coast, as well as a gas processing plant in Russia's Orenburg region, which is located deep inside Russian territory hundreds of miles from the Ukrainian border. Ukraine's general staff reported that its military also struck the Novoshakhtinsk oil refinery in Russia's Rostov region using Storm Shadow cruise missiles provided by the United Kingdom and France, triggering several massive explosions that were captured on video by local residents and posted on social media. These strikes on Russian energy infrastructure are part of Ukraine's deliberate strategy to demonstrate that Russia cannot wage war with impunity, and to degrade Russia's capacity to fund its military operations by targeting the oil and gas revenues that form the backbone of the Russian economy and war machine. A concerning new dimension has emerged with Belarus, Russia's closest ally, becoming increasingly involved in the conflict beyond just allowing its territory to be used as a staging ground for Russian forces. President Zelensky has directly accused Russia of using ordinary apartment blocks on the territory of Belarus to launch attacks on Ukrainian targets, a tactic designed to circumvent Kyiv's sophisticated air defenses by attacking from unexpected directions and making it more difficult for Ukraine to detect and intercept incoming threats. Even more alarmingly, satellite imagery that has been analyzed by 2 American researchers appears to show that Moscow is stationing Oreshnik hypersonic ballistic missiles in eastern Belarus, marking the first deployment of these advanced weapons outside Russian territory. The Oreshnik missile system, which Putin has touted as a game-changing weapon that cannot be intercepted by any existing air defense system, would significantly bolster Russia's ability to strike targets not just in Ukraine but across Europe, raising the stakes of the conflict and creating new security dilemmas for NATO members, who would suddenly find themselves within range of these hypersonic weapons. The diplomatic dynamics surrounding the Trump-Zelensky meeting revealed the complex power relationships at play in efforts to end this war. Trump told the political news outlet Politico in characteristically blunt language that Zelensky does not have anything until Trump personally approves it, making crystal clear that the American president sees himself as the ultimate arbiter of Ukraine's fate, and that no peace deal can proceed without his explicit blessing. Trump also indicated that he expects to speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin soon, suggesting that direct American-Russian negotiations may be imminent, and raising concerns among some Ukrainian officials and European allies that deals might be made over Ukraine's head without adequate consideration of Ukrainian interests and sovereignty. Russia's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova stated that Russia believes negotiations with the United States to end the war in Ukraine are making gradual progress, describing the talks as slow-moving but advancing steadily, which suggests that despite public posturing and continued military operations, serious diplomatic channels remain open, and both Moscow and Washington may be moving towards some form of accommodation. Public opinion inside Russia itself appears to be shifting as the war drags on with no clear end in sight, and casualties continue to mount. According to polling conducted by VTSIOM, a state-owned research center, a majority of Russians now expect the war in Ukraine to end in 2026. With 55% of respondents linking their hope for a better year to a possible end to what Russia officially calls its special military operation in Ukraine, a euphemistic term that deliberately avoids using the word war. This polling suggests that despite relentless state propaganda and strict censorship of information, about military casualties and setbacks. Ordinary Russians are growing wary of the conflict and eager for some kind of resolution that would allow them to move forward, though it remains unclear whether this public sentiment will translate into any meaningful pressure on the Kremlin to moderate its maximalist demands, or whether Putin will simply continue to ignore domestic opinion as he has throughout his rule. As diplomatic efforts reach this critical juncture with the Trump-Zelensky meeting just hours away, the fundamental question remains whether the gap between Ukrainian and Russian positions can be bridged in any sustainable way. Ukraine faces the agonizing choice between continuing a war that has already cost hundreds of thousands of lives and accepting territorial losses and limitations on its sovereignty that many Ukrainians view as unacceptable capitulation to aggression. Russia, meanwhile, shows no signs of abandoning its core demands, including permanent Ukrainian neutrality and recognition of territorial conquests, while simultaneously continuing military operations designed to seize more territory and strengthen its negotiating position. The involvement of the Trump administration adds another layer of uncertainty, as Trump has made clear he wants a quick deal but has provided few details about what compromises he would be willing to accept or what pressure he would be prepared to exert on either side to reach an agreement. European allies watch nervously from the sidelines, concerned that their security interests and commitment to the principles of territorial integrity and sovereignty might be sacrificed in an American-brokered deal that prioritizes ending the conflict quickly over ensuring a just and lasting peace. The situation remains extraordinarily fluid and dangerous, with the potential for both diplomatic breakthrough and catastrophic escalation existing simultaneously as the world watches to see whether this moment of intense diplomatic activity will finally produce a path toward ending Europe's bloodiest conflict since World War II, or whether the killing and destruction will simply continue indefinitely.